How are we doing? Good to hear it. My name is Kenneth. My pronouns are he and him, and I am one of the curators and hosts of the St. Louis Poetry Center's Poetry at the Point. I would like to find McAllen. Where are you? This is McAllen Lay. She is now with me as a curator and host. So I just wanted to point her out and say thank you. We're very glad to have you. It's bringing some awesome ideas and fresh energy and helping me with this work. So just wanted to recognize McAllen. Thank you for coming out to our, what month is it? March? Poetry at the Point. It's been a long time since I've been here. Like the last reading we did in 24 was in October. And then we take a little bit of a break for the end of the year and we come back in January. And I had like the worst flu of my adult life in January. So Andrea Scarpino took over for me. So it's been like 6 months since I've seen you guys. So thanks for coming out in the actual human flesh to a poetry reading in 2025. I don't take that for granted. As usual, big shouts out to the members of the St. Louis Poetry Center. You can sign up to do that in the back at the table on your way out. We have a QR code. We can make it super duper easy. Talk to Aaron about everything that entails at some point this evening. Always, we want to recognize the Missouri Arts Council and the Regional Arts Commission for funding the work, the programming that we do, among other funders. We always want to thank the Focal Point for keeping this lovely space up and available for us, a tiny little nonprofit like they are. A couple of events I want to point out to you that are accessible on our website too. Coming up next month, National Poetry Month. We always highlight all of our programs and have something from all of our series, et cetera, going on in that month to celebrate that month. So our Sunday workshop on April 13th is with Rosalie Moffitt. And then our observable reading the next day is with her and Erica Lewis. Those are at the High-Low in Grand Center. And then on April 23rd, we will also be back next month here. I'll give some details at the end about that. It'll be quite a special reading, so keep your ears open for that. Housekeeping, bathrooms are out this way. Make a left and then a right. There are gendered, specifically gendered and gender inclusive restrooms for you. Buy some drinks next door. I actually haven't been there yet, but I know that you can buy a drink, bring it over here, enjoy it, and then take that glassware back. So support your local Maplewood business while you're here. If you're watching this on Facebook Live or on YouTube, hey, how's it going out there at Alvar's Internet? It's good to see you. Comment, ask questions. For those of you here live at the Focal Point, as you see these two folks reading tonight, Michael and Scott, please think of questions you might like to have them talk about and answer in dialogue with me at the end, because we're going to have some conversation. So I would love to have those questions be tackled while I'm in dialogue with them. I think that is it. So I'm going to start us off inviting up Scott. Scott Berzon earned an MFA in creative writing from the University of Michigan and is the recipient of the Frank Vincent Memorial Prize, the Meader Family Award, and the Roy W. Cowden Memorial Fellowship. Scott's creative work has appeared in a variety of publications, including Acorn, Cream City Review, Humana Obscura, Poetry Midwest, Quarter After 8, Southern Indiana Review, and others. Scott lives with his family in St. Louis and works in Jewish communal settings. He serves as a poetry editor for our very own December magazine. Please welcome Scott to the stage.
I have no nerves other than how to interact with these people over here that are online. This waving is good, right? Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you, McAllen. Thank you, St. Louis Poetry Center, for this opportunity to almost be leading into National Poetry Month. I'm going to read 3 different kind of sections of poems with different themes. The first one, the first theme that continues to interest me is related to kind of how our attention shifts from ground to sky, back down over and over and over again. I've become a little bit fascinated by that. And then I'm going to talk about a newer project that I've been working on and then end with a series of haiku. This first poem is called Palpitations. I pull over for a flock of birds, step out of my car, and watch the way hundreds of them at a time don't collide. It is dawn, and the sequence of their palpitations is unpredictable and whole. I can't say why it happens when it does, but along an edge, a few brave birds break off for the ground. Could it be that hopping and walking are most enjoyable, and flight just a means to an end? Is the fear of getting caught what keeps them bronzed on the skyline? This next poem is a fall poem, my favorite season, and it is called Apples. It is fall, and I'm watching a small group of children hold apples to the sky, wrists twisting slowly as though simulating orbits. There, at arm's length, dusky reds swirl with gold, and I find myself full of desire to keep them afloat. Just as soon as I wish for eternal safety in the stars, each fruit comes back to earth, too plump for a boy's pocket. I see one of their bicycle baskets well wrapped in blankets, and with surprising care, the apples are returned there so as not to roll or bruise. I cannot follow wherever they go next, but there's reason to believe in horizontal journeys too. Fields stretch in every direction towards the nearest neighbor, and to deliver a blessing is a path mapped by the heart. This next one is my second shortest poem that I've ever written, but it'll be the shortest one for tonight for sure. This is called Bounce House. What we inflate has greatness. Walls waver, breathing space where there wasn't, and a floor giving in after a moment really doesn't. Back to the air over and over. What good is a roof when the heavens are closer? This poem is called A Short Note to Pluto. And the first line, my mother's in the audience tonight, the first line comes from a long tradition growing up where I was always taught to root for underdogs in all parts of life, but this plays on that a little bit. It's called A Short Note to Pluto. I was taught at a young age to root for the underdog, and in a memorable project long before 6 scientists had their way with you, I sealed an envelope full of praise. Here is to ice, I wrote, and to eccentricity. Here is to the small among us, the coin noise in vacuous space. To whoever found the balloon to which my note was tied, I have your response within the glassine sheets of a photo album. Thanks for scrawling in what I assume was your offhand, otherworldly. Thanks for saying that in miniature, we are also whole. This poem is titled Prince, P-R-I-N-T-S, but it does play a little bit on the other spelling and meaning of that word. Prince. Though the word sounds singular and born of pomp and circumstance, there's a crisscrossing on the floorboards of equal magnitude. They arrive through a door that goes both out and in, sometime after a thaw. Leaning down is all that's asked of us. Listen, the beasts clap for us. This is the last poem I'm going to read from this particular group. And it's a poem about an asteroid that was discovered and named in the 1860s. And I've always kind of been fascinated about who gets to name things, so this talks about that a little bit too. It's called Elpis, E-L-P-I-S. Solely a human craving, naming that which spins beyond the earth jar. But to call a dark carbon Elpis, or hope, misleads the mind. It rings too close to help us, a plea. Is that how we throw our voice into the skies, like rubbed coins into murky water? Is that what we need when reading Keats and when our heads bow down from drink? What do I know? Maybe hope is the right word after all. Maybe the blue shifting of galaxies is pure mood. Okay, this next sequence is born out of a very fun and accidental experience that I had at the public library, which is a place I like to go and read and write. And I overheard a patron talking to a librarian requesting title after title after title. And I was eavesdropping mostly because the titles were of interest to me. Otherwise, I would have kept to myself. And at the end of the conversation, the patron said, "How many titles can I actually request, from the library?" And the librarian's response was, "You can check out 100 items at a time." And I came up out of my chair from where I was sitting and was just dumbfounded by the generosity of that and that it was actually a real thing. Came home, told my family I was going to check out 100 books. My daughter is in the audience, begged me not to do that. I went back the next weekend and did that with the intent of trying to do so at random to see how those books might speak to one another and how they might speak to me. So this is an ongoing project that I'm currently calling 100 books, but I'm going to read a handful of poems about those. The first one is called 100 Books. Murder appears twice among the titles, also stars. I'm not suggesting a balanced universe, not today. I'm home, kitchen table covered in books, and the radio declares another mass shooting. It feels debilitating. I walked the rows of the library early this morning, eyes closed, touching what felt right to touch, and feeling a pulse. The randomness of it all, communing as one. Music and memoir, Spanish verse, the fiction of storms. As light from outer space lands on them here, words of presentness appear, to use like gauze. This next one is a prose poem. It is called Second Overdue Notice. Rather than bold or an oversized font, try giving away the endings. Tell the customer the last horses gnaw through their saddles in an act of defiance. Reveal with no uncertainty that the ill woman gives away her hair, not to the charity for which she volunteered, but to a single bird. Holding on too long is the work of the stars, not ours. This next one is called Dog-Eared. I became fascinated by what people do to their books and then don't undo those things. So this was born of that. Who turned down these pages? How many people left them this way before me? Some packed among vandals. I've spent hours of false steps trying to tie one dark corner to another. And to what end? This is fiction. Everything is covered in wet foliage. Perhaps disrepair is but the singular link to be found. It is late, it's raining, and I hear hounds calling out beyond my window. These are their blessings for an easy sleep and a new hunt at dawn. This is called When to Write of the Heart. When to write of the heart. When the heart is absent from the index. When the heart is on a highway far from the nearest hospital. When flowers are purchased for the heart. When the drawn heart is anatomical and not two halves in symmetry. When morning stills the heart more than night and stars. When the heart asks for a friendly reminder, and when you can answer the heart in earnestness that yes, it's time to take inventory. The last one I'm going to read from this section is called How the River Works, and two people in the audience are part of this poem. How the River Works. On the pull-out map of Rome, the Tiber tunnels blue through the city. A color I imagine is much closer to the springs of the beech forest from which it came. I can pinpoint where I'd sit, given the chance to visit, a place where I could hear only how the river works, nothing more. I'm too old now to consider a jump from a bridge like the raucous Romans who leap into the new year, but I hung from one once on a dare. The woman who is now my wife was there, as well as a dear friend, and a picture was taken of my bare body above the water. If memory serves, there was cheering for how long I held on, or was it laughter when I couldn't let it go? I'm going to close with 10 interconnected haiku that are titled How to Touch a Tree. And I'm just going to pause briefly between each of the haiku. How to touch a tree. One hand first, in open palm. Don't speak the first words. Which do I prefer, the leaves or snow underfoot, the cool or the cold? Along the tree line, there is a scampering thing, keeping its distance. We are not stronger than the weakest tree. Sledding season. Bur oaks in winter. A boy skips acorns across the frozen water. Leaves near their breaking point. A drop of rain on her yellow shirt. Such a bend to this tree. The river mud sipped up for years. Look at that acorn, its hat pulled down tightly, and no storm in sight. In the cedar tree, a boy with no shoes, cicada shells. A 14th blackbird, we've named them and told the trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. We were talking at dinner about how large the font needs to be for an old poet to read their poetry in the evening. And he said that 14 point was not enough. That's usually what I go for. What would you end up at? 18 or 20?
18 was still
18. There you go. Just for those keeping score at home, 18-point font will suffice. Michael Pfeifer earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Missouri School of Journalism and returned to earn an MA in English studying poetry with Larry Levis. He earned an MFA in poetry from the University of Iowa Writers Workshop, no small feat, where he studied with Marvin Bell, Henry Carlisle, Donald Justice, and Sandra McPherson. He's published in numerous literary journals and received the 1980 St. Louis Poetry Center Chancellor's Award, judged by little-known poet Howard Nemerov, and the 1987 Poet Laura Ratner Ferber Award. He stopped submitting poems for publication in 1998, but continued writing and has recently started to again submit work, much to all of our joy. Michael, please.
Hello. Well, first, thank you all for coming out. Audience is very important for poets because it completes the process. We write things, but we really write them either to be read or to be heard. I also wanted to thank the St. Louis Poetry Center, Focal Point, Badler Poetry Society, Kenneth Pruitt and Callan, and my reading partner, Scott Berzon. The first poem I'm going to read is a little bit of a confessional poem, and I'm not a big fan of confessional poetry. And it's also about the inevitable. And it sort of ties in with the comment about 18-point type. Aging poets. I confess, I belong to a secret society, the sage and aged poets. We enjoy many perks: free spa visits, discounts on airline tickets, a car service, airport lounges, a Colorado chalet, a Minnesota lake house, term life insurance. You may have noticed that published is not one of the benefits. Not magazine acceptance, not chapbook or print volume, not listeners or readers. Really, only the aged part is guaranteed. Even sage is questionable. But we are of an age, as they say. Trained as strictly as ninjas or secret agents, we can be anywhere. You may stand next to one of us on the bus or in the grocery checkout, invisible, but bound by oath or dumb luck to poems. Some enter the brother and sisterhood of poets through the aged doorway. Some have served long apprenticeships, wearing out typewriters, watching versions of software come and go. Even MFAs fade to soft paper, laboring to be sage and acknowledged, to be read, but mostly assured of age. And one day it comes, the faint ticking, barely audible in youth, now booms, insistent, tick-tock, tick-tock, extinction's footsteps in the hallway at night, stirring in the bad knee or back, in cancer and dementia. Yet here we are, unwavering and invisible, knocking together poems on the veranda of an imaginary French villa. This next poem was written for Rattle Magazine in response to a prompt they have. They have a contest every month where they have an image, and you then they ask poets then to write a poem about that image. So the image in this case was an expressionistic like painting of a woman with an umbrella. And this poem was published online by Rattle in January of this year. After rain. She appears as blue shadows across the market dust at Adiba, where the umbrella makers rattle and shape their ephemera, confident as a mystery waiting to be told, holding a ticket for a train of sand and fear. Pale resurrection sisters surround her. Their dark umbrellas eclipse the sun to hide her face a streambed of fog and remembrance, a collapsing umbrella after rain. This next poem, during the pandemic, I began taking photos of objects or scenes I could find within 50 feet of my house. Many of the photos turned out to be reflections in the lake outside our front door. Trees reflected in water. In what world are we the reflection? Living at the whim of light, a murmur on water, and yet sufficient for beauty, which is the same as love that knows the sun will vanish one day and yet persists. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a paleontologist. And I've long been fascinated by the cave drawings of our ancestors, their lives and their relationships to spirituality and our own relationship to spirituality. This poem is titled Prayer. Ask nothing of God. Expect nothing of God. Consider yourself a leaf. Listen to bird song. Let weather caress and punish you. Unfurl and tremble. Accept your graceful fall. Like a leaf, the red and yellow tumble across stones of air. Ancestors painted ochre horses to draw near to them. On the stone walls, the bison and the hunters, shadows formed from fat and iron like you, speak in thankfulness. Their appeals for horses and bison, for the great herds, were mute murmurings meant for comfort without expectation. This poem features two homophones pronounced pearl, the gem pearl, and pearl spelled P-U-R-L, which means the soft sound of water in a stream or moving over sand at a beach. And the P-U-R-L word is the last word in the poem. It's titled Forgive the Pearl. Forgive the pearl, its priest, the layers of teary prayer, smoky rings laid down as the dictation of water, the scrabbling of sand toward the shore, the plunge toward an endless pearl. I worked for a fair amount of time as a technical writer, and I have a number of poems, perhaps because of that, that are instructions or a kind of documentation. And this is one of them. A course of study. Study the reluctant leaf, the valley of ferny eyes. Learn the mathematics of soil and the cruel temperature of weather. Discover ice beneath your bed. Plant your feet in oblivion. Never touch the door. Leave the pattern of shadow for another time. Place your hands upon the Bible of your eyes and press the verses of various shades, beginning with purple and ending with green. Beware of the ignorance of knowing. More instructions. Against travel. Don't do it. Don't travel. Let the world come to you on storms, on the dry wind of sunny days, in the dark cloud of starlings coming to roost for the night. Let the world come to you in the sad face of the woman at the grocery store, staring, perplexed at her shopping cart, which is nearly overflowing with things she did not buy. In the eyes of the child just awakened across the city, who wakes to see a flower in surprising bloom. Let the world come to you in the breath of lovers and in the gasp of their illumination. Let the world come to you in the breath of those who hate you, even those who believe they know the reason. Let the world come to you in the lazy spin of a cottonwood leaf. Do not travel, or you will surely miss these things, and instead rush into an empty room. One of my favorite poets is the Chilean poet Pablo Neruda, and this was inspired by a line from one of his poems. Memories valise. I carry memories valise. It is small enough to fit under my seat on a train or in a cafe, yet large enough to consume a room. In winter, it is cold as an alphabet. In summer, it sweats with regret. The clasps have the patina of tears. The leather is like a photo of children in which you can see the adults they will become, though not of their own accord. And this poem, I think you know what it's about. The Nazis. The Nazis born of air came, and bare trees like dark flames sprang up to argue against the November sky. When the Nazis born of wealth arrived, the unburned houses of the poor were reduced to rubble. The thin dust waved like silk flags in the wind, like a cold in the city's chest the entire winter. The Nazis of every day face themselves in the mirror, and the face can be anyone's. Their blood is blood. In the camps, the refugees are like seashells, delicate. The wire is edged with soft purple, morning and evening, or is invisible. It can only be seen when a bird crosses the sky, a fleck in that monstrous eye. and more instruction. Further instruction. Taste the grains of sugar that have spilled across the table. Accept the black withering of words. Defend the purpose of a morning glory. Discover the lost city hidden in your breast. Notice the woman pleading with the stars. Do not depend upon the color white to reflect every color for you. Neither will black absorb. Upon this you should concentrate, the argument of leaves and earth. This poem had its beginning, sort of imagining it, as I reflected back on a happy history of family meals when I was a child, and they often broke down in uncontrollable laughter, and my sisters are here, and they were responsible. The Lamenting Kitchen. In the lamenting kitchen, sorrows boil over and hiss on the hot stove. Yet the smell of bread and sage also remains, lingering from the joys of yesterday, spread across the horizon as a few clouds in an immensely blue sky. The table is furnished with the salt that has been distilled from tears of laughter, and pepper ground from the dancing steps of a child. There is a glass that is empty and satisfied to be so, sitting next to a yellow bowl that holds memories in a doughy embrace, as if they would rise like yeast of their own mystical accord, and thereby raise a cake from the brown and black pan we held for a moment. This poem had its genesis in thinking about gamma rays and all the other pieces of light and radiation that are passing through us all the time. And also in relation to that thing about my own experience with malignant melanoma. I got better. Sunlight. I will not die by darkness. I will die by light, by the arrows of sunlight that tear through me, light that obeys no boundary. I will not die by darkness. I will die by light, by the paint and pain of the illuminated world. And this is the last poem I'm going to read today. This poem was written as a response to a call for prose poems from the Eastern Iowa Review. And it was published by them in February of this year. And it's sort of self-explanatory too. It's kind of the way a lot of poems start. Nothing to say. I have nothing to say. And so, of course, my mind races off to find the storm that is kept in a drawer and written on a piece of plain paper. With nothing to say, I can easily bend to kiss your lips and find that a blue spring spins up from within you. With nothing to say, I can tell you that 3 birds flew overhead as an omen of something, but they disappeared over the line of trees before the pilgrims could light the incense that would spell out the portent. With nothing to say, I'm free to mention the tortoise of my slow beating heart, or the rope of her sex that Rapunzel let down. With nothing to say, I can look into a mirror and see the dark accidents in my own eyes. Thank you very much.
Scott's already coming back up. In the next 10 seconds while I move things around, I encourage you to tell a joke. No jokes? Okay. What are you laughing at?
I thought of a joke, but it's on.
Tell me the joke.
What do you call a dwarf psychic who's on the run after escaping from prison?
Oh, God. Okay, go for it.
Small, medium,
This joke does not reflect the views of the St. Louis Poetry Center or the Focal Point. Scott made me sit here because it's really bright, so I can't really see you. I'm going to trust that you're still there. So first of all, again, while we're talking, interrupt me, raise your hand, ask a question, because I want to generate conversation that is interesting to you, for sure. But one thing that I'm going to start with is with Scott, and this is mainly because I have a bone to pick. Ben Ga, if you're watching, I'm going to pick this bone with you. This is about like haiku and form. And so I'm all jokes aside, Ben Ga is an excellent poet, writer, writes in some traditional Japanese forms. And the question I wanted to ask he and his writers group, and they were here a couple of years ago, is a lot of those writers, if I'm not mistaken, tended to write mostly in those forms. And my question was always, how do you know that an idea always wants to end up in that form? In other words, when you have a creative idea or a poetic sparks in your brain, tell me about that short journey from that spark to a haiku. How do you know it wants to be a haiku versus something else? Because it's such a condensed thing.
I can answer that, but it is funny that you're mentioning Ben because I recently saw Ben read for the first time, and in between each of his haiku, he rang a little bell. And so at the last minute today, I was like, do I bring a bell? No, don't try and do the Ben thing, just like do your own thing. So for me, almost all of my haiku are born of solo walks or hiking that I've done. And I think that when I'm by myself, there are smaller things, like short form kind of like phrases or pieces from the natural world that come to me that I kind of tuck away. And that, especially during the pandemic, that was a very sacred kind of space and alone time for me. And so I think when I get home and jot those down or put them in my phone when I'm on the hike, I don't want to tinker too much with them because of that sacredness. And so necessarily they just stay small. I have written haiku for coursework and things like that, but the ones that I tend to enjoy the most and am most proud of are born of kind of just being in the natural world. Yeah.
Okay. I'll kind of piggyback off that a little bit and toss it to you just in regards to form, because I, without kind of looking at my question on my phone right now, I did have a question prepared for you about, you do have a lot of poems that are short lines, short in length, and I just want to ask, when you are crafting a poem, do you have that end goal in mind of a condensed, well-wrought thing, or is that 20 drafts in that you kind of get to that, seeing it that way?
Usually I have that form in mind. I'm aiming for something that has short lines and it's relatively limited in length. And I think that's because when I hear speech or if I try to listen to myself, we tend to talk in short bursts. And so I think I'm both following that and what I hear from other people, and then it's just my natural way, I think, of speaking. And usually the brevity of the poems is that I do like the idea of, I'm aiming for something that is very condensed, because I think that's a good way to force people to reimagine things. And sometimes in longer poems, especially in readings like this, I think people can get stuck. They'll stop to think of they'll hear a line that they like and they'll start thinking about that line, and then they come back and you're 4 lines in and they go, well, what did I miss? So that's, I think, another reason why I try to use short lines in shorter form. And probably also influenced from Tang Chinese poems and Emily Dickinson. I admire both those, both the Tang poems and Emily Dickinson.
Okay.
You can say one more thing.
I also tend to write in short forms, and that was really interesting, Michael. I'd never really thought about the publicness of being able to kind of keep your attention on a form like that, but similar to just wanting poems to be more accessible, I do feel like less text on a page perhaps invites in new readers of poetry, and so I have very few poems that like exceed a page, and I think both of our poems also tend to be fairly narrative, and I think there's an accessibility thing there that we're both about.
I'm gonna find something.
Do it. Love it. Let's go.
And I guess I sort of had thought of this previously, but you reminded me of it. Because I had a background in journalism, you're taught to keep things short and eliminate any word that's not necessary, and to break things up. There's visual paragraphing, and you're trying to make it. If you have long paragraphs, it'll appear inaccessible. So I think that's another reason.
Yeah, I like this idea of, or at least where we're headed with talking about accessibility. I usually talk about generosity, because I think accessibility can have this kind of negative connotation to folks that, like, if I make it accessible, that means I'm somehow dumbing down the work, which is not necessarily true. But I think when I think about generosity, I think I don't want to make it a puzzle for the reader, right? I do want them to dig into the poems, which is why I want to pick on a little bit the comment you made about that you're not a big fan of confessional poetry. I want to hear more about that. And one of the reasons is because as a incredibly amateur critic of what I'm about to say, I noticed a lot in, let's say, the early 2000s into the mid 2010s, there was a lot more very established journals like Poetry and other kind of very kind of big shot poetry spaces that started to publish a lot of voices and poets from historically marginalized identities, and like those folks talking about their real lived lives in ways that had not been read in those big spaces before was a form of confessional poetry, but maybe not in the way we would sort of pin it sometimes. So anyway, all that to say, I'd love to hear what you think about confessional poetry and why you're not a big fan.
Yeah, I think I don't think I would consider the poems of or expressions of people who had been marginalized and are marginalized, expressing their lived lives. I wouldn't consider that confessional so much as just telling the truth about their lives. And I suppose that's true of the confessional poetry I don't much like. But there, I guess, in contrast to that, I would say it's mostly white people's problems. And to some extent, if it gets too much into that, there comes a point where I'm going, I know you've got problems, but how about therapy? I have my own problems. This isn't helping me, and I'm not sure it's helping you. I guess I think Robert Lowell was a big fan of confessional poetry, and he sort of steered Sylvia Plath that way, and I'm not sure it helped her.
You can clap for that. It's cool. I want you to talk about more about 100 books, because like in an era when let's just name it, libraries are under attack for a lot of BS reasons, and I think it's important to talk about the significance culturally and just in our social lives about libraries. So yeah, say more about the project and what like how you are feeling about it now that you're into it a little bit more.
I do want to say, just because, again, my daughter's in the crowd, often, she is a voice of reason. So I didn't throw the idea out immediately that I was just going to take my own path and go back to the library. And her concern was the staff. right? Like we, ever since our children were young, we have gone to the public library and we believe deeply in them. And the idea of wanting to make sure that the staff weren't going to be burdened by my pet project is very honorable. And so the deal that I ended up making before I went to the library was that I was going to ask the first librarian I saw, is this going to be a burden? I'm going to explain what I want to do, and if the response is yes, like, or I, read the room, read the vibe, I would bail on the project. To my delight, the exact opposite happened. They loved it. They were taking pictures as I was pulling them off the shelves. They wanted to, just kind of like somebody put it on their Instagram. It was interesting because I said that I wanted to truly pick them out in random fashion, and they didn't have a way to truly randomize that process. But what they did instead, because I had my eyes closed, my eyes are bad even when they're open, but they walked me through the 12 or 13 different sections of the library, from kids' books to reference and foreign languages. And, you can imagine the stack gets big very quickly. So we were having to make trips over to different tables to set them down. The staff were so supportive of the project, and I've since gone back a couple of times to check out some of those original 100 books. And very recently, within the past month, I went back and did kind of another random collection to kind of add to. And I would just encourage people, like, I've just had so much joy from the project, and you could do it with whatever thing you want. It could be 100 songs, it can be, but truly just kind of like seeing how they speak to one another was fascinating. I'm currently working on a poem, I don't know where it's gonna go, but it's literally talking about the length of that receipt that probably spans the whole of this stage. It is folded over 8 or 9 times because that was, what printed out when I checked those out. So,
Scott, did you write this up and make it public? As I think it's a very important statement about checking out books. Checking out 100 books is a nice emphasis. So what have you done with it since?
I've sent out some poems for publication from this series, and a few have been accepted. And in my cover letter, I've decided to kind of just give a little bit of context for the project, so that you might be able to sense some kind of library literary theme through it. But I do try and give a nod to that. That said, that's the poetry editors of journals are probably not who needs to hear that. They are already supportive of books and libraries, we hope. So I appreciate that, and I will think about how to use that to do good for the libraries.
So if we Google you, we could find these recently published poems?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. Another question?
Yeah, I had a question, Scott. So it's interesting because I think libraries are it gets to be so transactional. We go to the library, check out a book, we do a thing, we go home. And I think for your project, it's flipping that. It's engaging the library in a public event. And I think it's really exciting for that. So I just want to give you some kudos on that.
Is there another question? Okay, sorry, you can just holler.
I was just wondering what you meant by books speaking to each other.
So I kind of stole that line a little bit from a poet that I worked with during my undergraduate degree, who has a line in one of his poems that says, the books that we need most choose us and not the other way around. And so I'm just somebody that kind of believes, I don't call it fate, I don't know what I actually call it, but I believe in coincidence, I guess. And what I did find is I was just like combing through the books were just like so many strange similarities, whether it's the naming of characters or pictures that might be appearing in different, ways or different formats. There were so many things to look at. I mean, I didn't have enough time, even though the library now lets you keep most of them for like 3 cycles, before, unless somebody's requested them. So maybe I should have started a little smaller, but that's what I meant by that.
Yeah, just yell. I definitely can't see you. Go for it. Plaid shirt.
Okay. Larry Levis is one of my favorite favorite poets, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Wasp poem. And I've been asking trained poets, if you will, well-read poets, what poems have you read that have an unusual object or subject in them that, because of it being so unusual and that well written, it winds up being highly memorable. And Bridget Pagine Kelly has, a goat's head, and Dickey has the sheep child, and Levis has wasps. And I was just wondering, for either of you, are there any poems that you've read that have this unusual object in that, and it winds up being one of your favorite poems?
I cannot think of the name of the poem, but there's a poem that's stuck with me by Galway Canal, and the object in it is I think it's a seal rib, and it details hunting polar bear, Inuit hunting polar bear. They do it by freezing a seal rib in fat, and then the polar bear comes and eats it, and when it gets in his stomach, it opens up and cuts the polar bear to ribbons inside, and they just follow the polar bear's bloody shit until he dies. But you don't forget that kind of thing. And, yeah, it's very memorable. And now you're stuck with it, and you're not gonna forget it. So I would say go, do search Galway Canal polar bear, and
The Bear.
you'll find it.
It's called The Bear.
The bear. It's the bear. Yeah, it's the bear. That's the only thing that comes to mind right now. But you're right. There are poems where the object in it really sticks with you and it helps make it memorable.
That was an amazing question.
It's an amazing question. I was certain I couldn't think of one, and then I just thought of one. And I bet you know this poem if you come from journalism and things like that. But Elizabeth Bishop has a poem called "The Man Moth." It's hyphenated man and then moth. That was born of a newspaper misprint that was supposed to be Mammoth, and so she creates this fictional man moth character that's riding in this subway underground. And there's this. The image that sticks with me is this creature looks up at the moon, but instead of seeing the moon, sees it as a hole in the sky, and it's very haunting. But you should look that one up too.
That's awesome. Any other excellent or even non-excellent questions? Yeah, in the back.
Thanks again for your reading. You both mentioned family in your poems. Are they cool with that?
Yeah.
No pressure.
Somehow only the groom's side is responding.
I mean, it's a good question. Like, the more honest you are about the actual realities and humans in your life, the more you do stand to potentially step on toes. Like, it's a great question. I've certainly, in my own practice, have coded that stuff before. Thoughts about that?
I've written obviously some poems that do involve family, but really not too many. And I think it's because it's, even if you wrote a poem that featured a friend, there is a tendency sometimes for things to be misunderstood, and someone can think that you're saying something that maybe you are saying it, but you didn't know you were saying it. I think the same thing happens in fiction too, that if you get too close to reality, that you at least have to accept the blowback that you may get. But I do it, but it's mostly about stuff that's more distant past. I've got some poems about both sets of grandparents, and I have some about nieces and nephews, but I don't write a lot of those.
It's true.
Okay. Fair enough. We are starting to get close to the end of our time, so I want to make sure we have a chance to answer all of the lovely questions you have. So I'll make a last call for that. And there's a half-hearted hand raised right there in the front. Go for it, man.
Sort of some technical question, circling back to the beginning, sort of short forms, type forms, short lines, short
Yeah.
poems. You both have a very sort of continuous sort of breadth of language in your poems. Do you, when you're composing, do you think in sentences and break them into lines, or do you think them in lines and build them into sentences? Good question.
Yes.
I would answer this very differently a couple of years ago because I have gone through different iterations of that. And for better or for worse, right now it's for worse. For worse, I am a little bit too fixated on what my end word and starting word is going to be. And in an effort to just use more concrete language, that's become more intentional. So it's been a little bit less about breadth or length and more about what is that end gonna look like and how am I gonna continue down on the next line?
Yeah, I would say I tend to think in phrases, and that those become sentences or not. And in terms of line breaks, usually I'm thinking, again, sort of probably in a journalism sense of sort of visual line breaks, but I'm also thinking in terms of breath, and sometimes I'll break for some sort of emphasis. But obviously when you're reading, that can be hard to convey. Some of that will only show up if you read the poem. But that's two different ways to enjoy a poem. There's reading it and there's hearing it. And there's some poets who I love and I've heard them read and they should never read their own work. And I'm not sure if I'm one of them. I always thought if I were going to have, my ideal reader would be Robert Mitchum. I think I would love to have had him read my poems, and you would pay attention, because he would be Robert Mitchum.
You would be indeed. So the last thing I'm going to ask these folks to do is which is a practice I stole from a fantastic poet and thinker. So we're going to gather some paradise. So I'm going to ask these two folks to talk about an artistic thing, hopefully a literarily artistic thing that is really rowing their boat these days, just to give you a starting point as to where their brains are. And I'll start to give them a little time to think about what they want to say. I have, through the generosity of a friend who's been giving me a book or two of Chase Twitchell. And if you've never read Chase Twitchell, she's probably, I think she's in her probably early to mid 70s by now, but many moons ago when I was applying to MFA programs and got turned down from every single one, I really wanted to study with her. And it's been a real joy to pick up. The book I'm enjoying the most is, I believe, from the early 80s called Perdido. And she just manages to combine these really grandiose thoughts about how small we are in the universe with these very beautifully present details about like her yard. So it's this really impressive macro, micro sort of looping that she does that I just find enviable. So Chase Twitchell, check her out.
What is rowing my boat? I think I'm taking some courses through the Ocean Lifelong Learning Institute, which is called OLLI, and that offers classes for retired people. And they've had one that's been ongoing on contemporary Irish poetry after Yeats. And that has just been incredible. One, I wasn't aware of a lot of it. And as both side as a side benefit, we end up exploring a lot of Irish history because that inevitably gets thrown into Irish poetry. And with the stuff that is after Yeats, they're writing in Irish, and we have to get a translation. And so we'll have a situation where we hear it read in Irish, which sounds great but is unintelligible. And you'll see, I can't tell you some of the poets because I can't pronounce their names. It'll be, Maureen O'Donnell, and it has an X and a Y, and there seems to be no relationship to the letters that are used and how they're pronounced. But that has been really eye-opening. Other things, I don't know. Well, another thing that is already rowing my boat is participation in things through the St. Louis Poetry Center. And there's a group that gets together, the Badler Poetry Society, which is just a group of people that like poetry, and we get together once a month or so and bring poems if we have them and talk about them, and that has been great. And it's nice to be exposed to other poets. I have to confess that although I read a lot of poetry up through my 30s perhaps, I really don't read a lot of poetry now. And part of that, I think, is sort of I'll call it a defense mechanism in a way, because I don't want somebody else's voice to get in my head and find that I'm sounding like somebody else, which when you're, I think, initially starting out in poetry, that's a good thing. I mean, you want to imitate people that you like, and you try out different things. So I'm pretty selective about things that I do read, and that's why the Irish poets, that sort of forces me to read things that otherwise I might not. I'm also, my boat is being rowed by the I like science fiction and the Murderbot Diaries, which I recommend to everyone.
Okay.
Cool. What about you?
The poet Kay Ryan I've been doing a deep dive into her work, in part because she's a master of like short form, but more so, it kind of gets to what you were talking about with Chase Twitchell a bit, just in thinking about taking very macro metaphorical ideas and grounding them in plants or animals, a bird's legs, something like that. And so I've just been going through, it's been a deep dive, volume after volume of Kay Ryan's work, and her sound qualities are also just like, I'm envious of them, so.
Awesome. Love the recommendations. All right. Well, please help me start to close our evening by applauding these poets for sharing this. Thank you to Michael and Scott. Michael, Scott, how did I never make that connection? Right now. Our next reading is going to be next month on April 22nd. It's going to feature Andrea Scarpino and Eric Doisy, and we'll celebrate the life and work of Sarah Myrene Rapana. It's going to be really unique and special reading, so I strongly encourage you to come back next month. A reminder that if you're viewing this on Al Gore's internet after March 25th, you will be able to please continue to share, continue to ask questions. We want you to continue to share the work of the Poetry Center and of these two guys, and get their word out into their work out into the world. So please do interact and continue to do that. Again, thank you to the poets. Thank you to Aaron and Ezra for making this machine run smoothly tonight. Thank you to you coming out, an actual human being, and an evening during the week to see a poetry reading. It's pretty weird, honestly. And I appreciate that a lot. Be safe coming home. Good night. Take care of each other.